Welcome to the fastest daf in town today on Masechtas Rosh Hashana, Daf Beis, starting the Masechta. Arba Rosh Shanim Heim. There's actually 4 new years, as the Mishnah is going to explain. Be'echa b'Nisan, first of all, in Rosh Chodesh Nisan, that is a Rosh Hashana Malachim u'Regalim. It's a Rosh Hashana for kings as well as for the holidays. Rashi explains, as we'll see soon in the Gemara, that Regilam hayu limnais man shitreisehen, that when it came to the documents, they used to include the king of that country and what year he has been king. So the question is, at what point do we say that he's a king for 2 years, 3 years? Skipping a few lines, Yafil Ahmed b'Shvat, let's say he became a king in the month of Shvat, Oba Adar. In that case, Nisan. When the next month of Nisan comes, even though he's only been the king for like a month or two, we can still consider him no longer as the first year king. Once it's Rosh Chodesh Nisan, we consider it like it's the second year as a king. The Regalim, the Gemara is going to explain, we'll end up saying has to do with Bal Ta'acher regarding the Darim. Again, we'll discuss that in the Gemara. Be'echa be'elul. The first day of Elul was a Rosh Hashana or Meiser Behema. Now, when it comes to Meiser Behema, every 10 animals is designated as Meiser Behema, and you're not allowed to give Meiser from those that were born in one year to another year. Those are considered to be 2 different groups, and therefore, what constitutes a new year? So, any animal that's born after Elul is included in that group. Any animals that are born before Elul are in the other group. Rabbi Lezer, Rav Shimon, Omer be'echa b'Tishrei. The cutoff is actually first of Tishrei, not of Elul. Be'echa b'Tishrei, Rosh Hashana, L'shanim, L'shmitin, L'yobolois, L'netil, L'yirakos. And most of us are familiar that when we think of Rosh Hashana, the holiday, we think of course, the first of Tishrei. So that is actually the Rosh Hashana for numerous things, as the Mishnah says, regarding Shanim, and the Gemara is going to explain on Daf Ches what that is, regarding the dinim of Shemitah and Yovel. So in the 7th and 50th years, respectively, it says Rashi, Mishenichnas Tishrei, once it's the month of Tishrei, Asl L'charosh L'zro Minatorah. You can no longer plow or plant, and that is Minatorah. There may be rabbinic requirements even before that. Netiya Yerakos, regarding plants, so Rashi says Laminian Shnei Arlo. When it comes to trees, the 3rd year. At what point do we say it's considered to be like a new year? Says Rashi, I feel not of Av. If let's say you planted in the month of Av, Kalta Shenata Harishana L'Sof Elul. So it's already completed its first year once it hits the month of Elul, or in this case, Tishrei. Yerakos, also with vegetables, regarding the dinim of Meiser. Yarak she'ein tarmin u'meiser min nilkat lifnei Rosh Hashana al shel achar Rosh Hashana. So again, when it comes to the separations of Meiser, the various tithes, it has to be from that particular year. It cannot be old and new mixed together. And therefore, that's why we need to know the cutoff point. And then we have the famous Machlokas be'echa b'Shvat Rosh Hashana l'Ilan, Divrei Beis Shammai, which the song wouldn't sound as good. Beis Hillel Omrim Bechamisha Asar Bo, which of course is Tu B'Shvat, that is Chag Ha'ila. Note, as Rashi says, when in Meiser Shein Masin Peres Ha'ilan Shechantu Koidim Shvat Al Shechantu Achar Shvat. So it depends on when the fruits were ripened. So it's totally when we look at Tu B'Shvat, so that is the time in which, from that point forward or back, when we consider them as separate groupings. So now let's understand the first case of our Mishnah. L'malachim. So he said it is the Rosh Hashana for kings. L'may hilchasa, says Rashi. Koimer lama hukva yom miyuchad. Why do we set a certain day l'minyan malachim for kings? Amish al kol melech melech techila shanasu miyom she'amad bay. Why don't you just simply say that if he started on October 14th, so then that's when he starts. If he starts on the 15th of Tevet, so that's his starting day. And the year is a full year afterwards. Why do we say that no matter what, it's always Rosh Chodesh Nisan? So the Gemara says as follows: Rav Chisda, as we alluded to in the Rashi, Shtaros. It helps us because otherwise there would be a great level of confusion when it comes to Shtaros. Ditnan, as we learn in Masechta Shvius, it says that Shtari Choiv, when someone owes someone money and they have a document written, Hamukdamin Psulin. If it's a predated loan document, it is puzzle. So why? What's the big deal? You still owe me the money. We're not disputing that. The problem is, what if they don't pay me? So there's a lien on property. But it says Rashi, Lefi Sharatza Litra V'Kucho Shalachu Sada Min Halovim Isman Sheshtart V'Lo Kedin. Who? The problem is, if I really only lent you the money, let's not call it $100, call it $1 million on September 1st, but I wrote it that I borrowed the money all the way, let's say, in March 1st, many months earlier. So already, since the document says March 1st, any of the transactions or sales that would have taken place in between, there is a shibud, or there's a lien on that property. But it's not really the case because the loan didn't take place until later. So shtar mukdam isn't always puzzle. If they were post-dated, then it's kosher because you're not going to cause any problems that people are going to lose their land shulkadin. So again, the reason why we do this is in order to alleviate this potential issue of there's all these different kings, they write different dates, and then you may end up having shtar mukdam. Torabam. Melch she'amad be'esrim b'tisha ba'adar. Let's say you have a king that starts literally the day before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, on the 29th of Adar. Kivan she'egia echa b'Nisan. Once his second day of being a king takes place, altalo shana. It's considered like a full year is completed. V'im lo amad el be'ech b'Nisan. Let's say he only started on the 1st of Nisan. Ein moeden lo shana ad she'egia Nisan acher. His second year will be a full year later. So you could either have been a king for 2 days or a full 365 days, and on paper it looks like you're king the same amount of years. Fine. As we said, v'imlo amad el be'echam Nisan in moeden lo el shana ad she'egia Nisan acher. Amar mar. So we said as follows: Melch amad be'esrim b'tisha, again ba'adar, right before the month of Nisan, you are a king. Kivan she'egia echam Nisan also shana. It's considered to be a new year. So what is that coming to teach? So on this, as we continue to Beis Amud Beis, let me bring all my test questions with me. Beis Amud Beis, Kamash Malan, the Nisan Rosh Hashana L'Malachim B'Yom Echad B'Shana Chosh Hashana. It's coming to tell you that, as we said, that must be that Nisan is the Rosh Hashana for kings, and also teaches us that even one day is considered to be like a full year. In certain halachic matters, one day is like a year. V'imlo amad el be'echad b'Nisan, as we said in the Seifa, if you only start on the 1st of Nisan, ein moeden lo shana ad she'egia Nisan acher, you have to wait a whole year for your second year. So pshita, obviously, right, if we're already established that Rosh Chodesh Nisan is the day, so then if you started on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, you have to wait a full year to be counted a full second year. Gemara says, L'tzricha d'imnu alei mi'adar. Let's say that you were at least appointed in the month of Adar. So you didn't actually become the king yet, but you were appointed to be king. Madatema nimnu le treitin shnin. You would think maybe count him as the second year, Kamash Malan. Since he wasn't king yet, it doesn't count even though he was appointed to be king. So that's the chiddush. Tanabana. Meis ba'adar. Let's say you have a king that dies in the month of Adar. V'amad achar tachta ba'adar. And then you have a new king that takes over in that month. Meinin shana lazeh ulazeh. So the din is that we count for this one and for that one. Okay? In other words, they both will be labeled as having been a king for this year as well as the year for the new king. Meis b'Nisan, let's say, again, the reason is because the first king, he basically finished, for the most part, his year. The second king, since he started before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, so that will now count as a year. So a few days later, when Nisan rolls around, it's like a second year. Meis b'Nisan, let's say the first guy dies in Nisan, v'omad acher tachna b'Nisan, and someone replaces him, so moinin shana lazul is that. So again, we count for this one and for this one. So we say like this. Let's understand this. Meis ba'adar, if a person, on the other hand, started, he was in Adar and he died, v'omad acher tachna b'Nisan, then you have the second king only started in Nisan, moinin rishayno shniel sheni. So in that case, we count the first one is the first year, and the second one is the second year, because the second person, he only started after Nisan. Omer Mar. So now we're going to understand all these statements. Meis ba'adar v'omad acher tachna ba'adar monin shana l'zeh. So pshita. So again, that should be a double plashet, because after all, the second king started in Adar before the month of Nisan started. So Madatema Shat the Lebetrei Lo Maninan Kamash Mulan. You would think that you can't count the same year for two people. Says Rashi, Mishenichnas Bohamelach Shemes Afil Yom Echad Lo Yichtavu Kol Shana Zu Vishtar Luminian Melech Oimid El Melech Hames. You would think that if it's the case that this new king comes, this guy died, even if he was there for one day, you shouldn't write for the entire year for this new king. Rather, you should write about the Melech who died. You would think that maybe you should, not that you could write about either one, but you should only include the one that died, because he started the year, so let him finish the year. So Kamash Malan, that Manan Shana Lazel Lazeh, that you can count for this one or for this one. Doesn't matter. And if you look in Rashi above, where it says Lazel Lazeh, Habo Lichtay Shtar Ba'adar, someone wants to write a star in the month of Adar, L'achar She'amad Hasheni, after the second king took over, Im Ratza Lichto B'Shtar B'Shnas Ploni L'Melech Shemes, he could write the year in which this person died, Kosev, or Im Ratza Kosev B'Shana Rishona, he can write regarding the first year, L'Melech Ploni She'amad. So because these happened at the same time, you can write again either about the king who was the king for this many years who died, or the new king and this is his first year. So again, the chiddush is that even though it's really it's overlapping, you would think maybe you're not able to do that. That again, once you have a king, you should be writing only that first one, even though he died, on the document Kamash Malan, that we don't do that. You don't have to do that. You could do either one. Okay, so that was the first chiddush. Mahudatema shakel betrei lo yimanin and Kamash Malan. Next case, Meis b'Nisan v'Amad Acher Tachta b'Nisan. So Meinin Shana Lazeh, again, you can count either one. So Pshita, you can't say this the same answer, because then there's no chiddush. You can't write the same thing twice with the same chiddush. So Madatema Kiyamrin in Yom Echad b'Shana Chashav Shana. Maybe the only time we say that one day is considered like a whole year is B'Sof Shana, is if we're talking about at the end of the year. Abel B'Tchila Shana Lo Amrin and Kamash Malan. You would think that when it comes to the beginning of the year, we don't say that, and therefore the fact that this guy became a king on the first day, that doesn't count. If he's a king for like one day or a couple of days, then that shouldn't work. Okay, so look in Rashi. Yom Echad B'Tchila Shana Lo Yachshav Lo Yom Echad Shana. Maybe it should not be considered to be a full year. V'lo Yichtavu Shtar B'Shana Zu Shmosh Mishemes, and a person should not write a star in this year in the name of the one who died. So, in other words, the fact that he died, so you can say maybe from before, but afterwards, maybe not. Kamash Malan, you could also write the star for this person who died, even afterwards. It's not a problem. Okay. Madatema shakel betrei lo yimanin Kamash Malan Meis b'Nisan v'Amad Acher Tachta b'Nisan Meinin Shana Lazel Lazeh Pshit is Madatema Ki Amrin in Yom Echad b'Shana Chashav Shana B'Sov Shana. The end. Double B'Tchil Shana Lo Amrin Kamash Malan Meis ba'Adar v'Amad Acher Tachta b'Nisan. So Meinin Rishayna Rishon Shni L'Sheni. So Pshita again, because he was replaced only in Nisan. So obviously that second king should only be counted from then. The Imnu Alei Adar, he was actually appointed from Adar. Umelch ben Melachu, he was actually, his father was the king. So Madatema Nimnu Le Chartin Shnin, so maybe he should be counted for 2 days, because not only was he appointed, he wasn't a king yet, but also was Melech ben Melech, so it was for sure that he was going to be the king. Kamash Malan, even so, we don't count it because as his second year, because he didn't actually become the king until after Nisan. Okay. So let's just stop there for a second. Let's see a couple questions. Question 3. Tanurbanan. Meis ba'adar, if the first king died in Adar, ba'amad acher tachta ba'adar, and then someone else replaced him, so meinin shan lezel lezeh, so he said you could write either one. So what is that coming to teach? So he said, Meis ba'adar, if the first king died, kamash malan maninan chad shaita lebeitrei, that we can still write the same year for both people. How about the second chiddush, which it says, let me just make sure I write this. Ma'adatema shata lebeitrei lo maninan kamash malan. And then what's the second thing? It says over here, Amad Akatachta B'Nisan, Meis B'Nisan, Amad Akatachta B'Nisan. So what's the chiddush in that? So you would think, question 3, Meis B'Nisan, Kamash Mon De'Apad Chil Shana, even at the beginning of the year, I'm reading Yom Echad B'Shana, Chashav Shana, and therefore it's considered like he had another year as the king. So that's the other chiddush. You would maybe think Vahadatema Ki Amrinan Yom Echad B'Shana Chashav Shana B'Sov Shana of B'Tchila Shana Lo Amrinan Kamash Malon. Okay, so that is question 3. All right. Let's look at TA 16. Meis ba'adar v'amad acher tachta ba'adar moinin shana lezel lezeh v'chein meis b'nisan v'amad acher tachta b'nisan ezu chiddush yesh b'nisan shelo shamanu ba'adar. Same question. So the Yom Echad, at least the second one. The Yom Echad b'shana chashav shana nafil b'tchilas shana. That is question TA 16, which again is identical to question number 3. Okay, and fine. Let's continue now with the Gemara. So the Gemara says as follows: Omer Rabbi Yochanan, how do we know that this is the truth? Where do we see that we start counting kings from Nisan? Shnemar, the pasuk says in Malacha, Mehi b'shmoinim shana, and it was in 80 years, v'arba me'er shana, in 400 years, L'seis b'nei Yisrael meretz Mitzrayim, from the time when we left Egypt, v'shana ha-revius, in the 4th year, b'chodesh Ziv, in the month called Ziv, hu ha-chodesh hasheni, that's the 2nd month, limloich Shlomo al Yisrael, that is when Shlomo HaMelech became the king. So what does it mean the 2nd month? So Rashi says chodesh Ziv hu Iyar. So that is referring to the month of Iyar, and therefore we're going to see, obviously, Iyar comes after Nisan, so we're going to have to bear that in mind. So we're trying to establish when a person is the king. So again, this took place in the month of Ziv, in the month of Iyar, which again is the month after Nisan, that Shlomo was the king. So Makish Malchus Shlomo Yisais Mitzrayim. We're comparing the two. Ma Yisais Mitzrayim in Nisan of Malchus Shlomo in Nisan. We're talking about the leaving Mitzrayim, which of course happened in the month of Nisan. So too, it's talking about being a melech, so therefore it starts in the month of Nisan. V'yasiyas Mitzrayim gufam non. How do we know the Nisan maninan? Dilma Matishrei maninan. How do we know that we start counting from Nisan? Okay, we left in the month of Nisan, but how do we know that's when we start counting from? Lo sakadaipach l'chsiv v'yal Aaron HaKohen el hor hahar al pi Hashem v'yom Hashem. So it talks about how Aaron HaKohen died, and we know it was Bishnas Ha'arboyim, it was the 40th year, L'seis Yisrael Miretz Mitzrayim, from the time in which the Bnei Yisrael left Mitzrayim. B'chodesh hachamishi be'echad l'chodesh. He died in the 5th month, Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av. He died in the first day of the month of Av. Rosh Chodesh Av is the yortzeit of Aharon. Uksiv, and it says, Vahi bar boim shana. It was after 40 years. Ashte Asar Chodesh, on the 12th month, which is the month of Shvat. Ba'ashte Asar Chodesh, in the 11th month. The Echad al Chodesh, in the first of the month. Diber Moshe spoke. Now, Midikoi Ba'av, first of all, the Psukim are talking about the month of Av, and Aaron died. V'karle Shnas Arboim, and it says that was the 40th year. V'koi B'Shvat, and it talks about the month of Shvat. V'karle Shnas Arboim, and it's still the 40th year. Mechlal the Rosh Hashana Lav Tishrehu. If Rosh Hashana was Tishrei, then it would have been the new year. The fact that it's the same year from Av until Shvat, so it must be that the Rosh Hashanah is Nisan. Now, Bishlama Hech Mefarish Do Yisis Mitzrayim, I can understand that which is explicitly mentioned about Mitzrayim. Elahai, the second pasuk, Mimai Do Yisis Mitzrayim, Dilma Bahakamas Mishkan. How do we know that this second pasuk that we're talking about has anything to do with Mitzrayim? Says Rashi, Dilma Hakamas Mishkan, Shai B'Shana Hashenis. We know that took place in the second year. Where it says Kidim Rav Papa, Shnas Esrim Shanas Esrim L'Gzer Shava. So there's a Gzer Shava of Shnas Esrim Hachinami Shnas Arboim L'Gzer Shava. So we're making this Gzer Shava, says Rashi. Rav Papa Kuhu Shnas Shiba Posik Tzricha Limud Zemizeh Kuhu Gamelhu Rav Papa Merabu Limud Sosim and Meforish Din Gzer Shava. So we have a Gzer Shava to tell us, in fact, that this pasuk is not talking about Kavas Mishkan, but rather it's talking about Yisitz Mitzrayim. Now, Ma Kan Yisitz Mitzrayim, Ma Kan Yisitz Mitzrayim. Umemai de Masa de Av Kodim, Dilma Masa de Shvat Kodim. So we're assuming that you have first Aaron died in, we know it says Beferish on Av, and then later on in the same year is in the month of Shvat. So therefore we say, oh, must be, if it's the same year, must be because it's Nisan. So no, maybe it's the other way around. Maybe first the story of Moshe took place in the month of Shvat, and then Nisan came, the year didn't change, and then Aaron died. So how do we know? And therefore, why is it the same year? Because Tishrei is the new year. Don't think that is the order. I'll show you that the story of Aaron dying took place first. After Sichon is hit, when it came to when Aaron died, Sichon was still alive. How do we see that? As we see in Gimel and Aleph, it says Vayishma HaKanani. It mentions this person who's the Kanani, which we'll discuss who that is. Melch Arad. So Ma Shemua, what did he hear? Shama Shemes Aaron. He heard that Aaron died. Nistalko Anani Kavod, that the Anani Kavod which protected Klal Yisrael left. The Ksaber Nitna Rishus V'Hilachim Yisrael, and therefore he thought, now I'm able to fight. The Hainu Dechsiv V'Yirukol Eda Ki Gava Aharon. It says that the Eda saw and the Yiru, they were afraid because Aharon died. The Amr Avo Altir V'Yiru El V'Yirau Kidereish Lakish Ki Mishamish Bedal Lashonos. The word ki actually could have four different meanings. What are the four possibilities? If, Dilma, maybe, El, but, Daha, because. Now, therefore, in this case, ki represents Daha, because. And therefore, it's telling you that clearly what happened was Aaron died, and then only afterwards, Melch Sichain came, and therefore this is the proper order. Aaron died, and then this whole story took place, and then we have what's going on in the month of Shvat, and it was all in the same year. So again, it's a raya that the Rosh Hashanah is Nisan. So where it says Midami Hasim Kanan Hacha Sichain, what are you talking about? They're two different people. So Tana Hu Sichain Hu Aaron Hu Kanan. It's actually the same person. So why did they have this person have different names? Sichain Shedaima Lasayich. He was Bamidbar. He's considered just like a sayich, like a foal, like a small horse that's found in the wilderness. It says Rashi, Ayer ben Sus. That's one reason why it's called Sichain, which is obviously derogatory. Canaan al Shem Malchuso, because he was a melech of Canaan. Umashimo Arad, but his name was Arad. Arad Shemo. Ikadiami Arad Shedaimel Oroid. Some people say he was comparable to a Chamor Habar, like this wild donkey, the midbar in the wilderness. Canaan al Shem Malchuso Mashmo Sichain Shemo. But again, at least at this point, we're establishing, we're going to have to stop here, that when we're talking about the month in which is the Rosh Hashana, it's Rosh Hashana is Nisan. Question 4. V'yachal livnois b'chodesh hasheni b'shei b'shnas arbel malchuso ma hapirish b'sheni. What is it referring to in the second? So that is b'chodesh hasheni leminyan shenos hamalachim. Okay. Let's see. Okay, that we will see in actually on tomorrow's daf. Okay, so we're not going to continue with that. Let us see TA 17. No. Question 17. Okay, TB 17, which is we just touched upon this. Kim is mishamish bar b'shanos. Be'ezel loshem mishamish b'pasik v'yiru kol ha'eda ki gava aharon. Al tikri vayiru el b'yirahu, that they were frightened. So lashon daha of because shenaisim tam l'davar. It's explaining because Aharon died. That's why they attacked, and they thought that because the Ananiya covenant were not protecting them anymore, therefore they were vulnerable to attack. But again, the point is to show us the chronological order of how things took place, and therefore to establish up until this point there is a raya that Rosh Hashanah for kings is the month of Nisan. Ad kan.